Peace. This is the Ask Your Oldhead podcast with Justice Rajee. I'm here with my guest, Jordan Thierry.
Yes, sir.
How you doing today, Jordan?
Say it like you mean it, brother.
Indeed.
I'm good, man.
Cool. So I always start with giving you a moment to give reverence or respects. Shout out to somebody that you want to say something about. So go for it.
Thank you, man. First of all, shout out to my mother, Trudy, who's currently in the hospital, and we're hoping for a full recovery. Shout out to my great grandparents, Maddie Sherrill, Ollie Thierry, my grandparents, Ollie Thierry Jr. and Mary Thierry, and my father, of course, Ollie Thierry III, and to Carlos Crutch and Kim Carroll, Kevin Carroll, and Jerry Walker, Lisa Walker, my other parents.
Word up. Peace.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. So we'll go with where I always start is can you give me a principle or a standard, something that you live by that is something that, how you try to move through the world right now?
Man, I'm trying to move through this world in a way that is soft. You know what I'm saying? And my footprints are light because I want to respect the earth. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I want to respect the space that we've been given to create. The other piece is, man, I'm really focused on acceptance. Mm-hmm. Human acceptance, and not trying to control the things that are out of my control. And accept people for who they are and who they show you they are. You know what I mean? Okay. So much of I think, like, our frustrations in life come out of, being mad about us not being in control of the things that we dislike, the things that we want to fix. Of course, there's things that we can fix, right? Like our democracy, right? Like the problems in our community. But we can't make choices for other people. We have to let people make their own choices. We have to let people be who they are. We have to accept them for who they are, and do what we can to support them, right? Mm-hmm. And that's it. So, I'm just focused on really accepting those things and letting people be who they are, and being there to support people when they need me.
All right. So, is there any story or just an anecdote, something that you've experienced that helped you to get to that place where this is how you try to move? Yeah, I would say. I mean, look, man, family, right? Like we family. I love my family. Yeah. But we always kind of make the assumption that because we're family, we have a right to impose ourselves in your decision-making process or your strategies, who you choose to love and not to love, and how you choose to take care of your children. And we also sometimes hold ourselves responsible for other people's actions, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And there's a lot of guilt and shame that can come with that. So, to answer your question, yeah, there's been things that have happened inside my family and then just in friendships as well, where I'm so frustrated at people not making what I think is the right choice for them, right? And I had to let that go, and just be like, look, man, here's what I would do, but you got to do what you think is right. Yeah. I'm here to support you, if it's all in earnest, you know what I mean? And so, yeah, without getting into specifics, yeah, right? It's like those kinds of instances where it's like, man, why does he keep... For real?
Why, you know what I mean?
Yeah. That's what happened?
That's what? Come on, man.
No, you don't say.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think,
exactly.
I mean, I think I can empathize. I know, for me, I remember, and I like the way you framed it in terms of the soft touch or the light impression on the ground. Because there was a point in my own life where I had to go
I can't control that.
Exactly.
And then I took it a step further and was like, do I want to control people?
Right.
And I was like, I don't want to control people.
Mm-mm.
That doesn't seem like really my ethics, right? Like I want to control myself. I want to make good choices. But I know I took a step down in my frustration level with just, different things in my life by going, okay, well, I'll make a fair space for you to make a choice, and then whatever happens with it, I'll kind of make my move, based on, to the degree that I can, accordingly, and not be sitting there like, I really need you to do this the way I want you to do it. You know what I'm saying? And I think that's let me know if you agree, I think it's a frustration point for us a lot of times with just trying to get things done, like maybe on like a community level. Because you're like, well, why don't we just do it this way? And then there's people that are like, we should do it this other way. And then we're all sitting there grumping out at each other. And, or at least in our private spaces, maybe being verbalizing a frustration that, we don't need to hold.
Right. And I think it's especially hard for people like us, right, who believe in interdependence, who believe in reciprocity, who believe in community, right? And we take some responsibility for our peers, for our neighbors. So it's especially hard for us because, we want to help. We want to fix things. We feel an obligation to be there for our brothers and sisters, right? So there's kind of like a push and pull there where, it's just learning from experience, right? You got to sort of be like, okay, these are the things that I can step in and influence, and these are things where it's really not right for me to step in and influence, right? And so there are instances where, I try to do that, and I'm like, wait, that was, I got to pull back because that's not my lane. But I think it's really frustrating for us because we do believe in that, responsibility that we have for our brothers and sisters and to be there. And we are community-minded people, and we are leaders that try to, address and change things. So, I think we're the type of people who have the biggest struggle with that. You know what I mean? So, but man, I try to step back because I already got so much going on. I also have to remind myself, like, let me get some of my own stuff in order. You know what I'm saying?
Take care of my own business.
Right.
I'm overextended.
Yeah.
One more thought that came to mind when we were saying that there's, because I could imagine someone going, well, what if someone's, not necessarily going to harm themselves like in the acute way, right? But in the general sense that they're going to experience, sort of a negative outcome again. What would be something you would use to sort of calibrate how involved you should get? Like, would it be sort of like a Jordan cue where it's like, all right, I'll go this far, but I'm not going to go that far. Like, is there something that you would use to figure out how far to go to help somebody or to assist in a situation or a problem that you see in the community?
Honestly, I think the best way is to talk to the person that you're concerned about, right? And let them know, I want to help you, right? And but I also want to stay in my lane, not overstep my bounds, but I want you to know that I am here for you, and if there's something you need, let's talk about it. And let me see how I can best contribute, because the last thing I want is for you to be harmed, and the last thing I want is for you to continue to go through these hard times. But, at the same time, I got to respect your own autonomy, and your independence as a human being. So I'm here for you. Right. Let me know how I can, chip in, right?
Because give me the lane, or
give me the lane, yeah. And and I feel like when people know, okay, like somebody's got my back, and they also are, concerned about me, but they're also going to respect me. I think that in itself helps a lot of people, right? Feel like, okay, I have a community support here. Let me also, and people are looking out for me. Let me, make the decision that is in my best interest, but also does not, will not disappoint them, or will, you know what I mean? Will kind of meet the expectations, the high expectations that they have for me.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. Because oftentimes we kind of get start making these own decisions for other people in our own minds, and then acting on them without even talking to them, right? Human communication, man, it's the key thing.
Yeah, I mean, I found that most people don't like getting drafted.
Right, right.
They might have been cool with the decision or the thing you did if you would have said something first, or at least gave them the choice to say no.
Right, right.
I think that is very challenging, and especially in the space of trying to do something that you feel is good or is the right thing to do. Mm-hmm. I think it can be challenging for people to go, well, like, why wouldn't you? I mean, why he should be happy, and it's like, well, I mean, yeah, I guess you could say they should be happy, but it doesn't matter if they're not actually happy.
Right, right.
They may have had their own reasons for why they were doing what they were doing that I don't know about, and I'm big on sort of respecting that as well.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So, relationships, broadly defined. What's something that you understand now that maybe you did not understand as well as a younger man?
Man, so so many things, right? Mm-hmm. I think that the biggest thing, and I'll speak to romantic relationships right now.
That's me.
But I think it does apply broader, and it's connected to what we were just talking about as well. You can't put your happiness in someone else's hands. You know what I mean? I think for me, in my past, in some of my early relationships, I met someone, fell for them. They were the world to me. You know what I mean? And I sacrificed some of my own ambitions and some of my own things that I wanted to do, and sort of put those to the side because I was so invested in the idea of this relationship with this woman, right? And it was, made clear to her too that I had done that, right? And that is overwhelming, and that, that's a lot. That's a huge responsibility and burden to put on somebody else, right? When they see that you've basically given them the keys to your happiness. And so, that just creates, like anyone else would, they ran away. You know what I mean? Like, this is, whoa, hey, this is too much for me. Hold on, pressure, man.
Right. Like, what if this thing, you tell me that, and I'm making a decision that maybe I'm 72% on.
Right.
And if it go bad now, I lose my 28% and you're 100%.
Exactly.
That's too much.
It's too much, man. You can't hand over the happiness. Your happiness has to be in your own control, right? In your own hands. And the person that you are with in a romantic sense should be happy themselves as well. Right, by themselves. And this is something people talk about a lot now, right? But 10, 15 years ago, I didn't know that, and I didn't see myself doing that. I was just like, I want a wife, I want a family. This person has all these things that excite me, that make me feel like this like a good human being that I can see myself with, that I can see myself having, starting a family with, us working together, us building a beautiful life together, right? We were so young, I didn't know about all the things that were about to hit me in adulthood. Yeah. But, she saw I was like making major sacrifices for this young relationship, and basically gave her the keys to the city, the city of happiness, and that's a lot of responsibility, especially if you don't even want to be a mayor. You know what I mean? Like, wait a second now.
I might want to be a swim team coach.
Right.
I'm not even sure.
Right, trying to run the whole city. That's a lot. So man, that's the one thing, and then the other thing goes back to what I was saying before, which is the human acceptance piece, right? And so when you have a partner, You chose them, right? You chose them for a reason.
Right.
You you got to like them for who they are. Yeah. You don't choose them based on who you think they can be. Don't choose them based on the potential that you see in them, because you don't know if they're going to fulfill that potential or not. You got to like them as who they are, and they should know that, and vice versa. And then, don't get mad at the things that they don't become, or the things that they don't do, if that's not who they are. Yeah.
It's it's something I say all the time, is people spend time on what they think is important.
Right.
And it's something that I say sometimes to remind myself, one, right, like whatever I'm spending time on, it's the stuff I think is important, right? So therefore, let me do an inventory, let me check for a personal check, but also when engaging with others, and especially when you get into the dynamics of a relationship, a romantic relationship, and a partnership, and trying to be together, that if there are things that you're wanting and you're not receiving, right, and so then you're going, well, why wouldn't they do this that way? Why?
Right.
I mean, I'm right here, or this way, isn't this the way love's supposed to be, or whatever notions you've picked up in your own travel around how it's supposed to look. Once you start really playing ball, with a real person, other things happen. They got other motivations and drives, and quite frankly, there's a lot of stuff that you both can be taken for granted, and not, as I guess romantic as it may sound to some people, to go like, hey, what I always liked, wanted to do was this,
right?
And then they go, well, I wasn't really thinking about that, but I wanted to do this other thing,
right?
And so then, you can hopefully have, as I like to say, an adult conversation about what are we doing with here, where are we going, why are we doing this, and not just be filled with notions about what this could be. You know what I mean? Because I think
exactly.
I think for a lot of, I'll speak for myself. I've had my share of I thought we was gonna be this was gonna be it.
Right.
Like, oh man. My heart got chewed up like
man. Yeah,
like, and it wasn't even malicious. Now I know some people have had some malicious stories, and that's not my experience, but it was definitely like damn. I'm gonna pick my little heart up. And go do some push-ups, try to put it back together.
Man. Yeah, and you can't deny yourself. Like I was in a relationship for a few years. The first, that first year, 2 years of the relationship, I'm naturally a giver in a relationship. I'm a natural kind of provider, encourager. Like that's how I like to show up as a partner, right, and romantically. And so I was giving, right. And at the time, I was just so happy to be with this person that I wasn't worried about kind of like receiving. You know what I mean? After about 2 years, it was like, man, I'm giving a lot. I ain't really getting much. You know what I mean? Like, like I done cooked dinner I don't know how many times.
And I was going to cook because I need to eat. But
Right.
But
And I love to cook for the people I love, right? So like that's, it was never about like a checks and balance kind of thing for me. But after a while of continuing to give and just kind of seeing like, there's a lot of imbalance in this relationship in terms of who's putting out a lot of concerted effort, in my eyes. And, then I was that was the norm that I had set in the relationship. Yeah. So in her mind, she's like, well, this is just how, this is our relationship. This is how this is how we're doing it, right? Like, why would you have different expectations of me now when the first 2 years you weren't even asking for those things, tripping on those things, right? And so it was unfair for me to all of a sudden kind of change the expectation level. But at the same time, like it was my fault for setting that early on in the first place. And so now as I'm out there, I'm dating, I'm single, I'm out there, I'm like kind of checking myself in terms of how much I'm giving and early on and the precedents that I'm setting, because, you know, hey, it's not, a lot of times it's not sustainable. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think the thing I would add or comment on that too is what I've learned in my own, you know, relationship that, you know, has been going for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I get is the points where we've had challenges is being able to have some communication and also receive what the other person has said, sort of in good faith, and then you know, I would say for myself, from choices I made, especially when I was much younger, around some relationships, that I wasn't willing to be honest about my intention, and then also I recognized that I wasn't always really acting in good faith, right? Like I was sort of like, well, you know, keep this here murky,
right?
You know what I'm saying,
right.
And then, you know, I switched to what I call the Rajee system, where I'm just going to tell you what I want,
right?
And then, you know, I'm gonna live with the ramifications though,
right.
also. So if you be like, well, I'm totally not interested in none of that, and I'll be like, all right, well, damn, I guess.
Back to the drawing board.
I guess you're not coming over
right.
to watch Do the Right Thing
right.
on Saturday, is you? No, not coming over. It's like, all right, cool. You know what I mean? I think folks get into the jam because the challenge with asking anybody, even outside of romantic questions, you know, honest, you know, for honest feedback, is they may actually give it to you,
right?
And if you've been lying about your wish to really hear honestly what people think, you know, you're gonna have a rough couple outs, you know, until you figure out that either you like being lied to, or you just, you know, you're gonna have to learn how to like hear something honest,
right,
and roll with it.
Right. Nah, that's real, man. That's real. Well, I mean, especially on the murky point, you know, like, I can relate to that. You know, I can relate to that. But part of that is like, you know, sometimes you're not sure exactly what it is you want, but you want, you want something.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So,
right. Well, as I said, like, I want this to keep going.
Right.
I don't know where we're going.
Right.
But I want it to keep going.
Right.
Can we agree to keep going?
Yeah. Can we keep going? I don't know where we're going. But I like we're going somewhere, probably.
Right. And, you know, yeah.
We might end up right back where we started, but we went somewhere.
At least we'll know that we did it together.
Right. That we mobilized together.
Indeed. And then I got one other question on this particular note, and then we'll make a pivot. Is there something that any process that you've ever done for yourself, or that you would even advise to another person, like another person trying to figure out a relationship quandary, like a tactic or something that you would do or have done for yourself that you would suggest to somebody else to figure out, like, maybe what to do next if they're like, man, I don't know if this is going well, what should I do? If you got any kind of methodology, any tool, anything you ever done for yourself that you would tell the next person to give this a try?
Yeah.
Not definite to work, just maybe this will work for you. What would you say?
Man, I mean, there's a few things, right? So you kind of know sometimes when you're not in a great relationship, because when you're afraid to ask your peoples about it, like, what do you think?
Oh, like,
you know, yeah, ask your peoples about it, and you're scared because you already know what they're gonna say, and you don't want to hear it, right? You don't want to hear like, nah, man, like, y'all, that dysfunctional, or, you know, like, come on, man, you know, she ain't right for you, or he ain't right for you, like, you know, if you're already afraid to ask your peoples about it, you probably know, like, maybe this isn't a good situation, because your peoples are your peoples and they care about you and they want the best for you. So if they see you in a jacked up situation, you know, then they're going to let you know if you ask them. But oftentimes we don't want to hear that, you know, so we just kind of not bring it up, you know.
I'm trying to, like, you see the game last night?
Right.
Was it, if you never, especially when I was like teenager, like, I never my mom had no idea who I was on the phone.
Right.
Nothing. Yeah, my brother, he was, you know, much love to my brother. He was on team. Whoever I like, I'm bringing them by the house.
Right,
you know what I'm saying?
right.
So you could kind of get a read. But the sort of when you observe someone and you like, y'all two don't look happy.
Right.
Do you two see each other? Do yourself not looking happy? And then you gotta be like, or the worst one was when like my brother brings somebody by and I'd be like, I don't think my brother really likes you all. Like,
Right.
I don't know if I'm supposed to say nothing.
Right.
He's my brother, and you know, shout out to my brother. And, you know,
Right.
You know, mostly true. Mostly true. These mostly true stories, allegedly. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
You know, what do you to just be mindful that other people often can see when it's not going well with you, which is it also is a good learning lesson, because you'd be surprised how many people are really paying attention to how you're doing. And like, man,
absolutely,
you don't look happy. You all right, man? And you'd be like,
right,
me?
Right.
And you'd be like, yeah, man. You look.
What's up with y'all, man? Come on, tell me
Like,
what's up.
I was trying to hide it.
Yeah. So you know, I say that to say, you know, I ask my peoples, right? I say, man, look, here's what's going on. What do you think? You know, what's your read of the situation? I know that they don't know everything that's happened in the relationship, but I still, you know, trust their judgment, you know what I'm saying, of kind of the general read and the energy that, you know, me and this other person were putting out there as a couple, right? Yeah. So I ask my people about it, man. And I'm not a person who's uncomfortable talking about what's going on in my relationships. You know, I have other friends who they pretty much don't say nothing about, you know, you wouldn't even know that they had someone else. You know what I mean? Like they, like, are you still with someone? Oh yeah, we're together. Oh, all right, cool. You don't ever mention her, dog. So I'm just like
checking in.
Yeah, you know, 3 years. You don't ever say nothing about her. So, you know, I'm not that type of person, right? So for me, verbalizing is kind of how I process all these things going on in my head. So, you know, conversation, right? Talk to your peoples, get a read, man. Share your struggles and your thought process, and hopefully, if your peoples are good peoples, then they're not going to judge you on any of that, right? Mm-hmm. And even if they know you may be having doubts or you might be having some problems, hopefully they're not holding that against you, or they're not holding that against the person that you're with, because oftentimes that's why we don't share. Right, because we don't want our peoples to hold something against the person that we're dating, and have a negative narrative of them in their minds. Right, that then we got to battle that. You know, if we decide to stay with that person in the long term.
And I think that's a what I would frame is sort of like a knowing how much to share. Yeah, like you know, you can share. You know, at least for me, is like, you know, share. Yeah, you know, there's some things. Yeah, there's some things going on. Yeah, but not go. You know, let me tell you what happened.
Right.
And then
exactly what happened.
Yeah, exactly. All the details.
Right.
You know
and that's your version of what happened.
And it's like,
right?
right. It's definitely going to be skewed over to you. And then two, it's like, as your friend, and y'all, especially if y'all, you know, y'all got kids, or this and that. It's like, you know, I don't want to be I don't want to know nothing I don't need to know necessarily about that's real intimate and personal. Right. Like, now if I am the confidant for that information, then I'm like, okay, I'll take that. But you know, don't be telling no whole bunch of people all that.
Right.
Because then it becomes like sort of pressure on the dynamic.
Yeah, man.
You know. And that's one that definitely translates very well to your broader relationships and professional relationships and stuff too, like in workplaces and whatnot, where people are having an issue and it's like, now that y'all done told us all these sordid details, we all got to be here together,
right,
and try to act like we don't know these things that may not pertain to us, but like we know these people, these actors have committed and done these things. Like now this is real strange,
right, and, Yeah, man. So, I mean, let me give some more practical, like, I recommend this book to pretty much everybody. It's called The Mastery of Love by Don Miguel Ruiz. He's the same dude that wrote The Four Agreements. Okay. That's the book that really changed my whole kind of perception and how I look at and go about engaging in relationships. And a lot of it touches on sort of that, like, that happiness piece and that lack of control and expectations, right? And then the other piece is, especially if you're a man, right, self-identified man, I think it helps to take up sort of, learning about women's issues, right? Learning about sexism and patriarchy, and sort of how those things can play out in relationships, because in my experience, like learning about that really helped me understand sometimes where my partner was coming from when they were raising this issue, like their problem with me doing this thing. I'm like, I don't see why you tripping, like, and then I'm like, oh, I see now, like this little behavior of mine is a larger pattern of behavior that's connected to a larger systemic issue, right? That my partner has been experiencing from men for a long time, So I definitely say take that up, man, and you could start with some bell hooks readings, and go from there. There's a lot out there right now, but bell hooks is definitely a good and I think an easy read. And then the other thing I would just say is like relationships in my view take action, right? It takes people being proactive. Because that honeymoon phase only lasts for so long. Yeah. And then you got to actually really be intentional about, growing together, building together. And so, there's so many kind of things that you can do, like reading the same book. You know what I'm saying? Like doing, all these kind of activities that can help you continue to build together and kind of, develop a common understanding and shared analysis and see where each other's values are, understand each other's perceptions of the world, and how we walk in it, because people don't often realize, like, some people are looking at the world completely different. Yeah. When they wake up and they're looking at the trees, they see these trees one way and connected to a whole other issue. And, people like me looking at the trees and I'm, damn, them trees, the colors are beautiful, right? and another person is look at these trees, the earth is so precious, right? And other people are looking at, damn, these trees is in the way of my view. You know what I'm saying?
Like, trees about to fall on my house.
Yeah. That's just a great example of like how one thing can be perceived so differently, right? And so, I love to kind of get to that level with people in my life to see where how they see these trees, et cetera.
All right. Cool. So what's something that's just really important to you right now in your life? It's just something that's at the top of the list for Jordan.
Man, my boy sent me a little video this morning from Twitter of an interview Kanye did recently, right? And Kanye, sounding off on all types of stuff, but one of the things that he sees himself as is like a free person, right? He said, he says something. He's like, "You listening to a free man talking here." And I kind of liked how he said that, you know what I'm saying? Like a free man. Like I was like, okay, that's I see what you're talking about. But most of the stuff he's talking about right now is crazy. So I'm not, and actually shouldn't even use that term because he does have some mental health issues he's going through. But a lot of his conceptions are just faulted. Like they actually don't add up. So enough about Kanye, but that concept of freedom is actually something I'm really focused on, and the freedom in the sense of, I've worked a lot, I've worked hard, I've gotten my letters and whatnot. I've got a great network of people who I think, respect me and have a positive reputation out there. And at the same time, like I'm at a situation right now where I'm working for myself, right? And that was a big step for me to kind of be my own boss, and kind of have more control over my day, where I'm at and what I'm doing. And so to me, that was a step towards being, quote unquote, more free, right? And so now I'm focused on really just like creating the infrastructure for my life that is comfortable and minimal on when it comes to stress and anxiety. You feel me? and that allows me to be connected to the people that I care most about and have time for them. Because when you on the grind, I've been on the grind, right? Working 60 hours a week, I was shut down, man. I wasn't there for my friends. I wasn't there for my family in a way that I really wanted to be. Mm-hmm. And so that freedom for me is about creating that time and space in my life for them, right? Because that has meaning for me. That brings me joy. And so I'm working towards that. So what is my living situation looking like? How can I live in a way that I'm not struggling to make the rent or the mortgage payment every month? Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Those sorts of things, man. Like down to, transportation, down to the bills that I got to pay every month and the things that are taking up space in my mind every day, mm-hmm. Down to the news that I'm reading and then the notifications I'm receiving on my phone. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So I really, when I say freedom, it's about like creating that peace of mind. So the stress and anxiety from financial pressures, from, the big news of the world, right? From sort of the family and friends and their needs and how I'm feeling as a son, as a brother, as, a cousin, mm-hmm. as a godfather. Mm-hmm. So to me, that's what I'm focused on right now, is trying to create that infrastructure and build that life for myself.
All right. So you spoke on a couple big things there, because I've had the debate, and I'll ask you to comment on this. So, like, to me, a part of freedom is there's a level of your ability to live the way you want to live, and for me, not necessarily without restriction or some force or energy, some entity or what have you opposing that, but also accepting sort of that may become part of the challenge, right? Mm-hmm. To be the way that you mm-hmm. want to be, and that what do you feel is this as a landing point? Is there something specific that has changed in your life that has allowed you to have more of that feeling? I mean, you mentioned like the working for yourself, but was there something, beyond that, or something else in the way that you approach it that helps you to like have that sense of freedom?
Well, I think there's a couple of things, right? The one is like, believing in myself, right? Like having the confidence to go out there and do it. I didn't have it for a long time. I lost it, right? People might be surprised to hear that, but, I was sort of shook, to go out there and do my own thing mm-hmm. for a while, just from a kind of more of a fear-based mentality of all the ways that it could go wrong, instead of focusing on all things that could go right. And recognizing, my value and my intelligence, the things that, I could put out there in the world that people would enjoy and respect and want to experience, if that makes sense. So that was the first one, is like overcoming that and getting to a place where it's like, I can do this. Like, I have value. I have some unique ideas. Let me put that out there and see how it goes. So that allowed me to take that first step. Mm-hmm. Now that I'm in that step, and moving beyond, it's about routine and discipline, right? Like, I work from home. Sometimes I don't leave the crib, but I've made it a habit to get up and dress up like I'm going out every day, right? Like I'm going to an office, right. Like I have that routine of, getting up, having my breakfast of choice, my coffee, you know what I'm saying? Putting on my music and mentally getting ready to be productive, mm-hmm. that day. And then that carries on even just to the weekends, right? Because when you're self-employed, you're sort of always working in a way, and people are always asking you what you're doing. And so you always got to be primed to, talk about it and share what it is and, be be able to present yourself as a professional, and creative person. So to me, it's about that routine now and that self-discipline and knowing when I need to, like, okay, I can't go do that. I can't go kick it right now. Like, I need to stay in and just be productive on this project, right? And sometimes that's hard, because I like to kick it. Yeah. I like to chill. You know what I mean? So like it's a struggle, but so far so good, So I'm just trying to keep that going and again just minimize the other kind of distractions.
Mm-hmm. Do you think? And I'm saying this question for the. Well, I'll just say the question. Do you think you can experience that sense of freedom if you're not in a self-employed
Absolutely,
mode?
Man. Absolutely. Yeah. No, I'm not. I don't think that freedom has only comes with self-employment. That's just that's not how society should be. And B, that not everybody wants to be self-employed. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's so much value in a steady paycheck. Let me tell you. Like, come on, please believe it, right? And of course, like, we need our teachers, our the people who are garbage people, right? The people who sort of help keep this society in order and running, to have a feeling of happiness and freedom while also having a steady job. You know what I mean? I think that's what we're working towards in the social justice movement, right? So absolutely. The problem is that's not the case for so many people. They're exploited. They're taken advantage of at the workplace. They feel oftentimes like they don't have a voice. They feel like they don't necessarily have, are seen as equals with their counterparts. And they're oftentimes they're worked to death. You know what I'm saying? That's sort of been the norm, increasingly as, we become increasingly capitalistic and reduce the rights of workers at the workplace. So that's what we want to, I think, yes, it's possible. And I think that's what I want for everybody. And I also see so many struggles, especially in cities, like San Francisco or Seattle or New York, where it's just incredibly expensive to live, right?
Right.
Oh, can I say one other thing about freedom, man?
Go for it.
And shout out to your son, Freedom. But the two things I really didn't mention were the creativity aspect of it and the cultural aspect of it, right? And those are actually sort of like the two of the three main things that I've found my work on at Dream Chase Life, right? And so it's creativity, it's culture, and community. So the creativity piece is, I want to continue to live a creative life and be and pursue my creative endeavors. And so for me, freedom is having the space and time to do that. The other piece is culture, right? And that culture means, that freedom means for me, being able to be myself authentically, you know what I mean? And live with the values that have been passed down to me from my ancestors, and to have music, to have theater, to have film, song as a regular part of my life. Yeah. And so since I am self-employed and have more control over my day-to-day life, I'm able to build those things into my day-to-day life, right? And I also try to put those things out there for other people as well. So those are the other pieces to me, and I think this is so. I'm not the only person who feels that desire and need to have those things, integral as the foundation of my life. And so I think I just want people to know too that, like, you ain't the only one that maybe feels like that's missing or you don't have enough of. And we out here trying to help you make it happen too.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, I think the thing I would add that gets invoked when I think about freedom is, and what you're sharing on is there's a part about crafting your life to get it where you want it to be to the degree that you can. And then where there's either restrictions in our society, in our world, that are especially impeding your ability to just be in your own humanity, then, you know, freedom is also about responding accordingly and doing what you need to do to alleviate that obstruction.
Absolutely.
And whatever that may be. That may be organizing, that may be some other form of action, but it definitely, to me, is about some level of action. You know, and then you take steps and you make whatever the cascading decisions are to sustain that situation. And because I think that I think sometimes that can be, you know, kind of maybe circling back to part of our earlier part of the conversation, that the spending time on what you think is important.
Absolutely.
Piece, and that if you want things to be a certain way, as I like to tell people, if you think it needs to be changed a certain way and the rest of us aren't maybe moving on it, get busy and then let us know so we can jump on.
Hell yeah.
Like some of us may be working on other pieces and we just can't.
Right.
We can't jump on that.
Right.
So if you want it, then let us know. I'll sign up.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Whatever, you know, I might join the movement.
Right.
But I may not be in the place, you know, and I may honestly may not be in a place that I can activate on it.
Right.
But if you can, do that for us and then call us and bring us in and reach out to people and let's see what happens next.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I'm going to make us a pivot because I know you mentioned your creativity and what you do. I've watched one of your documentary and
Documentary film, yeah.
Documentary film.
Yeah.
And I know you're working on a project called Grandma's is the operating concept. Could you share a little bit about what it is you're developing and what you're working on?
Yeah, man. So I got a new series that I'm working on. It started out conceptually as a full documentary film, and I've actually shifted kind of the strategy so that it's actually going to be more accessible as a YouTube series. So it's called Grandma's Roses, and there's sort of a metaphor there with like roses and the blooming and the thorns and the beauty and the representations of all different forms of love. Right. And with the roses, they got kind of different colors, and this means friendship and this means compassion, etc. Grandmothers oftentimes kind of embody all those different forms of love, right? And my interest in starting this project was kind of exploring, that idea, that narrative of grandmothers as sort of unconditionally loving, nurturing, hardworking, wise, matriarchs, right? And all of those things are often so true. But we also, I think, forget how they came to be true and why they are true, right? So my thoughts are, okay, man, Grandma's so forgiving. Grandma's a survivor. She's so resilient. She done been through this, that, and the third. Why is that, though? Right? Was that her choice? Like, is all of that out of her choice or like innate character? It's nice to say that it's innate character, but nah, like it's not only that, right? It's that, like, these women, and in my projects on women of color, these women have had to make those sacrifices out of survival, have had to live those kinds of lives out of survival, right? And the survival of their kin. You feel me? So the project, the series is exploring and listening to the stories of different grandmothers across the U.S. And hearing about their struggles and their joys, the sacrifices that they made for their families and why they made them. And so we talk about relationships. We talk about their first relationships with their family, with their parents. We talk about their first, their marriages or partnerships, right? Intimate relationships. We talk about being, a mother and then being a grandmother. What's the difference between being a mother and being a grandmother? More importantly, we talk about their work, whether that be their work as nannies, as housekeepers, as factory workers, as, scholars, right? Like they run the gamut of all different types of forms of work and things that they've done in their community work, their community activism. Because at least I can speak for the Black community. Black women have really been the backbone of civic life in Black America. The men have been sort of the the public face of a lot of those movements, but it's Black women that were actually the ones really making stuff happen in the background oftentimes. And so I want to acknowledge that and also, make sure I uplift that in this series. And so, and a lot of this too is giving tribute and honor to my own grandmother and aunties and the lives that they've lived. And I interviewed some of them. I didn't get a chance to interview my own grandmother before she passed. But it also is very much grounded in some of the West African, principles and values of respect for your elders, listening instead of talking, you know what I mean? Gleaning that wisdom, and letting those stories, because oftentimes they speak in stories, right? Instead of just like, here's what you need to do. It's like, they talk in stories, and those are the teachings. And oftentimes they're not going to tell you they know the answer or that they have the wisdom, but if you listen, you'll see it. You're right. You'll hear it. And so it's grounded in that as well. And that's very important to me, and it's also a passion of mine. I could sit there and listen and just be there for a long time and just soak it all in. And I think the beautiful thing about this series is that I've learned that it has a lot of value for them as well, because I'm not talking to famous people. You know what I mean? I'm talking to just regular everybody grandma, right? And so oftentimes they haven't had someone sit there and want to hear their story. And so there's a lot of tears shed, there's laughter, and there's, I think, a lot of joy that comes from it, and from someone taking interest in the lives that they've lived. And I think there's healing power in that as well.
All right. Wow, it's a lot there. And I can speak to just experience with people, and especially with a lot of men, especially a lot of older men who have very strong connections with their grandmothers and their mothers. Some just due to the for whatever number of reasons. I don't want to totally take away their ability to tell their own story on why, but for many of us, someone within the family, either your grandmother, maybe your grandfather, maybe your father, maybe your mother, maybe the aunt that was, someone though in that elder role, different people in different families that are like the holders of certain, either, social, emotional dynamics within your family. I think kind of back to the earlier part of our conversation. And I meet a lot of men, if their grandmother was that person, their grandmother is almost like a deity. You know what I mean? Like they're not a real human. They're like, you know what I'm saying? Like grandma, grandma did this, grandma went to da-da-da. Like, grandma always had the food going. But and there's an admiration and a love, right? But there's not always maybe an understanding of why. Why would someone do so much work, or so much, take on so much responsibility? And it's something that I've tried to use as a bridge to have a conversation about privilege with men, to think about like just put it into context, right? Like why, given that we're, you're able-bodied human that can do a lot of things, why would this individual agree to, in many cases, put other people's needs before their own regularly?
Exactly.
Right? Not that they always did, not that in everything, but that they regularly, were the one that was up late for something, or stayed and went to the thing, or went over and took care of the neighbor's mom, because the other sister couldn't be there, and they went over there to check on them. And in your experience, as you started working on this or even talking about it, what has been some of the, I don't know how much of it you shared, but just talking about the project. Are there any things that like folks have said to you that surprised you or just were remarkable?
Yeah, man, so much. I'll tell you what I was surprised by. Mm-hmm. It wasn't a part of my protocol, my questions, my interview questions for them, right? Mm-hmm. But it came up in 90% of the interviews, and just hearing their stories, and is violence against women. Mm. Domestic violence and sexual violence. Nearly all the women that I interviewed shared that with me, right? Mm-hmm. And I knew domestic violence was a big issue in this country. I think that the number that's floated around is like 1 in 3. Man, look, for this generation of women that I'm speaking to, and then honing it in on women of color, that number's got to be, way higher, because it just, it was, from what I've learned, like from this oral history, it's an everyday part of life. Well, it was an everyday terror, right, for so many women during certain segments of their life, whether that be from their father or stepfather, or from their first, husband or child's father, or maybe the second or third, person that they were with, right? Maybe the second marriage, the violence against women, man, the sexual violence and the domestic violence, at one point or another was a regular, everyday terror for almost all the women I interviewed. And, it's interesting because especially the women of, my grandmother's generation, that's not something they talk about.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And so knowing that, I know that the numbers are even higher than what I've heard, but I already heard a lot. So, but when I heard stuff, it would be like, and then there was this, marriage to this guy for, 3 years, but that was just bad. That was just a bad move, and I'm like, oh, okay. And they kind of brush over, and I'm like, well, hold on, like, can you tell me more about that? What, why was he a bad dude, or what, kind of probing a little bit, and whatever they're comfortable with, you know. Yeah. And they were like, well, I don't know, you don't want to hear about that. And I'm like, well, try me, I might want to hear about it, right? Because our lives aren't always beautiful and perfect, and the nice things we like to hear about. I want to hear about everything, so tell me, and then well, if you really want to hear it, I'll tell you, and here's where it comes out, right? And sometimes these were things that they had sat there and were telling me, and I just met them, but that they hadn't even told their own grandchildren about this, right? About this violence they experienced. So there's some maybe safety in telling a stranger, versus telling your kin, and also, some of them may be at the point now where it's like, well, what do they got to lose, to share that? But I took that really kind of, struck me as like, man, I don't know what to do with all this content, but I'm starting by at least talking about it right here. Right.
Yeah. I think, one, I'm excited to see the work that you're putting together, because and I feel, I think some of the things you mentioned in terms of your motivation, some of the motivations why I started working on this podcast, is that we have stories, we have ways we try to approach life, and there are details and things to learn, things to understand that, the interview a highly successsive person that built the spaceship and all that is great. It's great. It's awesome sometimes, and it's cool. But I've learned a lot of things even about myself, and even what things I thought were one way, and then I'm like, oh, that was this other way, right? By having the fortune to, before my grandma passed, her sharing with me, especially as I got enough time with her as like an adult who had responsibilities that you just, when you've been, I think you're at the point in life where like your parents start telling you stuff that they ain't tell you, or your grandparent go, well, then you be like, wait a minute. Nobody told me that. Right. I was there when that was happening, right? And so now you go back and you see the life and you see the world differently, but also you turn those people in your family, those revered figures, into the complicated
people,
challenging people who are operating within complicated and challenging environments and trying to make decisions and choices and survive certain things and wrestle with their own internal struggles and that are not malicious, or they're not things may happen that were not necessarily this ill intent, but they're hard, right? And it's understanding that is different than maybe even knowing that, like, oh, well, I know it was tough back in the day, but it's like you hear somebody's story and you sit with them, you're like, whoa, I understand that, it like what you're talking about now,
right?
And so I'm excited to engage and see more.
Thank you.
I think it's like I said, I in my own grandmother, both of my grandmothers, but especially my maternal grandmother, who I lived with part of growing up, her passing and my mom going through her things and trying to sort out affairs. Is a person that had a lot going on, right? And a lot she was trying to do, and who she wanted to be, and what she could be based on her time, and and I encourage everyone, regardless of how you show up, but especially men sometimes, to like dig in a little bit, to especially because I hear a lot in our social spaces, like, well, when my grandma age, they would do this and that and another thing. And I'd be like, have you really talked to your grandma? Like real, like, I mean, if you really had maybe if you can, go have like, now that you're 27,
right?
Now that you're 32, go really talk to your grandma, man. Like, go ask her, because she might. She might surprise you though. Yeah. She might mess up your rosy dreams over there. Like, well, why wouldn't they all? And they'd be like, listen, man, this is an audio format, so you can't see the faces I'm making right now. But there's truths that I've heard now that I'm an adult, from the older women in my family and also other older women that I've had the privilege for them to share with me, where it tempers, and it tempers sort of my own ability to be strident about what does and does not happen in our community, so to speak. I mean, especially speaking to the violence and the sexual violence piece, where it's like, man, let's pump the brakes, man.
Yeah, man.
Pump the brakes. Word. Well, we're close to a time that maybe we should wrap.
Oh, for real? I thought we was going to talk about some books and music and.
Oh, we can keep rolling. I just want to cut it out. I don't want to suck up all your time.
I'm enjoying it.
Let me ask you this then, before we make a pivot. Is there with the series? Is there anything that we should definitely, or like I should make sure I record or look out for, or so I can point people in the right direction?
Yeah, let me just ask people right now to Dream Chase Life. That's our channel on YouTube. Please subscribe. We just launching this month in November, so the grandma series will be coming to you very soon, if not already. And we'll be releasing content every 1 or 2 weeks of a new interview. So subscribe to that. And then we got our Facebook page too, and that's where we do, a lot of engagement. And so Dream Chase Life's Facebook page, follow us on that as well. And I'm really excited to be sharing this content and getting people's feedback and ideas on it as well. So, yeah.
All right. So, what you reading right now? What you got on deck, man? I know you brought up, gave us the Mastery of Love as a read. What's something is there anything you're reading right now that is particularly in the Ivory. So.
Well, I'm one of those cats, man, that likes to read like 6-7 books at a time and make very slow progress on each of them. But right now I'm really reading this Maya Angelou's second autobiography, The Heart of a Woman, I think is what it's called. Man, can we talk about Maya Angelou just for a second?
Yeah.
Man, I just want to just give major props, man, to my sister. May she rest in peace. I had no idea, for a long time. I knew she was a famous poet, and that's sort of what I knew her, as for vast majority of my life. Never actually really thought to look deeper into all of what she has done and accomplished. Mm-hmm. And so the revelation for me was being like, yo, she was like front and center in so many movements. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? Like so many movements that, are critical to our liberation and to my own interest and passion and history and Black history, right? That she, worked with Dr. King, that she, had a relationship, a friendship with Malcolm X and was able to connect with him in Africa, that she was, married to an African revolutionary and, was a part and connected to that space and movement as well. That she, was, early on a playwright and a singer and, had these really interesting experiences with like Billie Holiday and all these jazz musicians, and I mean just like all of these things, right, from like the Harlem Renaissance and the Black Power movement and the civil rights movement to anti-apartheid, like all this stuff. She connected to all of it, man, and played a part. Wasn't just like a bystander, but played a part, right? And at the same time was developing and honing her craft as a writer, as a storyteller, and always was pursuing that in some way, shape, or form. And she talks about the writers group that she was a part of in Harlem, and all of the, how humbling and challenging it was for her to go and share her work and get, criticized but to like show up again, like that, man, inspiring.
Yeah. See, there's something heavy there, or I don't know. Anyway, because
speaking,
like I could see someone going like, "Oh, well, she was just a poet, right? She just wrote stories, right? And these are reframes I hear sometimes in our, unfortunately, in spaces where we're trying to, people that say they're trying to get something done. And I can say as a younger person and also at times a less informed person, I've at least tickled around the thought of like, why is this particular person that someone is elevated or that's a writer, that this and that, why are they important? Like, they just wrote a book. Who cares? They wrote a book. Right. But then not recognizing that part of what gave them the firmament to stand on to write those pieces was they were actually involved in things, right? They were out in mix, they were in meetings and this and that. And I wonder, do you think because there's something almost like like a foundational kind of activity, right? That's there in how many people do we not know about that she sort of had the opportunity to encourage, influence, and back and forth, right? But it wouldn't be recorded, right?
Right.
So in our own world, in our time right now, and even I guess I can say back to the ethos of how I met you,
right,
was like somebody had a meeting and they wanted to get some stuff done, and they're like, about Jordan, and they're like, oh, it's Jordan, I'm trying to meet other Black people that live here, that are from here. Do you think in this time we get some of those kind of returns from coming together that in other times was such a vital kind of place where ideas were formed? Do you think are we doing it well? Are we connecting to create new ways to handle our situation? or just how do you feel about it? Because I don't know sometimes.
I mean, we're in a unique place in history right now, right? Because, there is a heightened level of engagement, in communities, I feel like, and in Black communities in particular, which I think is a wonderful thing. I also just feel like we're, in the social media era, things kind of changing too, right? Mm-hmm. And so, there's the what do they call them? Sort of the click activists. What do they call it? People who kind of do the activism online. And I'm not a big fan of I'm not a big fan of social media personally. Like I have to engage in it professionally and have sort of slowly overcoming my despise, for social media. But it is a great way to share your message, and it's how people are engaging and connecting and learning. So I'm not hating on it, but it frustrates me sometimes because on forums like Twitter, the dialogue is so shortened, right? You're limited to I don't know. They still have the character limits. I don't even use Twitter like
it's
that,
bigger now. It's like
so they've expanded it, but it just
still a limit.
And I feel like there's there's a level of competition now, but who's the most woke, who's the most down, who's the most radical, and there's a lot of kind of self-righteousness and grandstanding that I feel like isn't productive. You know what I mean? And so, you sounding off on somebody online with the anonymity of like you're not really going to be confronted,
right? And
you're actually not really opening oftentimes a real kind of dialogue that bridges understanding and brings people together to solve a problem both people are concerned about. So it's about that the image of like who's the most down, who's the most radical, and I see a lot of that, and it's disheartening to me. You know what I mean? So I think when people are coming together in physical spaces, in community, is where that real work happens, and that's what I respect and am inspired by. So I think people are coming together in community like that are doing some really dope work. And I think that's where the work really is, and so I don't think they're doing it wrong.
Okay, because I find at least these are things like I'll speak to my wants. Like I want to, I write a little, right? So there's times like I want to write with somebody else or like read what I wrote. Now I could write and make my think pieces on make a blog and just be think pieced out. And there was a time when we had started a blog. I started a blog and I started posting stuff, and I was like, I don't really know if I have a coherent message, or I don't know if I have to have a coherent message. But also, I'm more introverted. I don't necessarily want all of my working out the kinks of my thought to be on sort of the permanent record of the universe.
Yeah, because then you might change. Your understanding will evolve, right? Yeah. And so 2 years from now, it's still online, it's still on your blog, but it doesn't reflect your current thinking.
Right. Doesn't. So I was like, and I know that that's what some folks do with a blog, where they just like, today I was really mad about this policy, and I just spit out 2,000 words on how I'm upset about it,
right?
And then then you just move on. And I was like, but I don't want to do that on the internet. Like, I don't want to have to like defend something that I'm like I marginally am invested in those words, but I needed to write them so I could get to these other words.
Right. That's real.
So I think and let me know what you think. I feel like there's because something that comes up in my day-to-day work is I work with young men, a lot of whom their information stream is their social network platforms. Like that's where they get that's where they appear to get what's happening in the world from, right? So from different people's Snapchats, different people's Instagrams, maybe not the Twitter a little bit, this and that, and then generally what's being shared on the internet. And so I've been trying to, quite frankly, crack the code on how do I get engaged with to see how you're seeing things without also like involving myself in stuff I don't really necessarily want to think about or have time to think about, depending on the information. Like, but also I'm concerned about like how do I communicate with you about some stuff I might want you to be aware of.
Right.
Like, how do we find? Because I feel like that's the secret sauce of the of our at least of organizing. Like how do I get you like the project you're working on with Grandma's and Roses.
Yeah, Grandma's Roses, yeah.
Grandma's Roses, right. So how do I get somebody that maybe get their attention so they may go sit and, especially as they're more up there, they go, man, I'm going to watch. I watched 5 of them Grandma's Roses. Man.
Right.
I'm going to go call my grandma.
Right,
man. Like,
right.
Or I want to, make sure they see it. Like, how do we improve some of these things? Because I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm concerned.
Man, I struggle with that too, bruh. Like, one of the things I had to acknowledge and try to wrap my head around, you dig, is like approaching this work in a patronizing way, in a condescending way with my audience. I don't want to do that, right? Like, I don't want to start out like, y'all dumb, y'all messing up, and I'm gonna give you the answers to not mess up no more.
Yeah,
right?
Get you straight.
I'm gonna get you straight. Let me explain this to you. Let me tell you how to really live your life. Like, that's not exact. That is not what I'm trying to be about, bro. So, what does my content look like then? And that's why. And I don't want to be one of those figures because I don't know. I'm trying to figure my own life out. You know what I'm saying? I'll share that journey with you. I'm the expert of my own experience, so I can share that journey with you and not have any doubts about that. And the other thing I can do is kind of share the conversations I'm having with other people with you. Right. And if I found them valuable, maybe you'll find them valuable. And that's what I'm doing with Dream Chase Life, is about kind of just uplifting those stories that I found value in and sharing them with other people. And that's what I tried to do with the Black Fatherhood Project too. But there was a part of Black Fatherhood Project where I was coming from a frustration and a condescending level. I don't think it came across that way in the film, really. Some people might say so, but I was trying to like inspire people to come together and strengthen families and also address the policy impacts, right, of that are so negative on Black families. So that's something I struggle with because there's a lot of this public figures, social media figures that come to their audience in a condescending way, and I'm not digging that at all.
Yeah, well, I think it's I have this notion about like humans, right, and that there's the way that we're social. We want to be together, right? That's how we've survived. That's how we've stayed alive. So a part of that becomes, especially if you have something to share, that you want people to hear, you want people to listen, you want to engage them, you want them to listen to you, and kind of calibrating the correct amount of getting you to listen to me, but not maybe overstepping where then I'm clawing at you to make you a part of this. And even me working on this podcast is wanting to I want to talk about myself, right? I mean, like, at the root of this, I have a sense of how I live and an experience that I've had with other Black men that I'm like, and someday some other men of color and other people will be on the show. We'll see. But I felt like how I experience is not being captured in what I see in like the conversation about like how we going to be a man and and I've seen the gambit. Like, I've seen there was a video, it was a brother in a barbershop in Houston, and the old head was just sort of kicking it about I pay my the bills in my name, I do this, like I take care of certain stuff in my house, and he was, I didn't take offense to it, right? But it was in the context of what the video I saw, it seemed like he was saying to the young brothers in the joint, like, if you are not kind of pulling your weight on some of this stuff, then that's a problem, right? I wasn't off put by the way he was approaching it. But I started digging through the comments. I was just, let me see what people say in the comments. And some dudes, some people I took as men, I don't know if they were.
Right.
But the way they said it sounded like they were saying they was men, and they didn't. Oh, he's discounting young men that maybe are staying in their girlfriend's Section 8, not in their own thing. He's not actually being fair to them, or he's just preaching. He's not showing how to do it. And I thought, and so I was trying to reason with this. Now, part of that might be my age, and I'm used to, I've been called the old man whisperer. Like I got some old, I can speak grumpy black man,
right?
Grumpy older black man that's trying to hold it together, and
right.
Smack somebody,
right?
I know how to engage with them,
right.
But I was trying to figure out like how can we engage around something like that, where it seems, like I guess that there's a possibility to see something that you may generally take as like good or healthy-ish, and then otherwise somebody else is being off-put by it, right? And that there's an attracting power to being the big man that has the answers, within humanity, right? Which I think can corrupt you, can take you somewhere, and so. My own struggle with speaking and talking about these things in a public space is like I have an opinion, and if you ask me straight out on certain things, well, what do you think I should do, Justice? Like I probably could give it to you, but I don't want to volunteer that information,
right?
And I think why I'm pulled to stories. You let me know if this is similar. Like what pulls you to storytelling? Because to me, part of storytelling is that it does actually give the listener a choice. Is how I've always felt. Like so, if I tell you, if you go, well, Justice, how do you? Well, let me tell you about this situation I had, and I try to tell the story, and then hopefully you'll take the best part for yourself. Whether you agree or not. For you, what is something that comes up with the value of telling stories? Like, is why is it important?
I guess with some hesitation and some a little just not shame, but I consider myself an intellectual, right? And like however people interpret that, like I like to engage in dialogue and things, a dialogue about different ideas and sometimes they go nowhere, and sometimes they give me inspiration or a solution to a problem I'm having. But I just enjoy that exchange of ideas and digging deep. Stories kind of give me the opportunity to do that, right? And they give me the fodder. They feed that, dialogue. And so I can have a dialogue with someone and then take that story that I learned from someone else and share it with you, and then say, man, check out what so-and-so told me, right? This is a really crazy story, interesting story. Like, what would you do in that situation? Here's what I would have done, or I don't know what I would have done. And how would this story have played out 30 years later versus 30 years ago? And what implications has that had on society? Or what implications does that story have on, her as a person, and how would it have, how would they manifest it in me, et cetera, right? So the stories are the fodder for the dialogue that I'd love to have with folks. And if I'm really being, technical and honest about it, is my passion storytelling, or is my passion story listening? I think it's maybe story listening, right? Like I said earlier, I could just sit and just listen, right? And when people meet me, they know, like, man, this dude's asking questions. Like, he's asking me real questions about my life. and I just met him, right? And but that's just, it's just who I am, right? It's why I decided to get a degree in journalism, because I love to interview people. I love to ask those questions. I learned to, engage in those kinds of dialogue and conversations. And I think it's a great way to build relationships with people too, So I forget what your question was, bro.
That's not good. We on the road. We on the right path.
Yeah, but
Yeah, well, I think it's like, I think as a person that, I think when you're someone that likes to listen, because I would say I think it might be probably something that we have as a kindred spirits. Like, I like to listen to stuff. I like to hear what people,
Right.
I remember when I left a job once, and folks had, somewhere, basically there happened to be like a gathering, and it was like people were saying things they would think, nice about, saying stuff about me since I was leaving, and it was like, Justice would ask me how I'm doing today, and I think he really wanted to know. And I'd be like, yeah, I did.
Right.
Like, I really do want to know.
Right.
Like, I wouldn't ask you if I didn't want to know. Like, I really wanted, like, if it's going great, I would say, oh, it's great. If it's kind of rough, oh man, I want to know that too. You know what I mean? And then to the degree that I can be with you in that moment right now, I may not be able to sit and help you fix it, but I might be able to be like, well,
right,
here's, maybe you should go home.
Yeah.
Maybe you should talk to somebody, or, man, I'm glad that's going well for you, those sorts of things. And so I think it's, so I think that's, but I think there's a part of, if you're a person that wants to listen, that you then also at some point want to, you want to like pass it on. You want to give it back up. You know what I mean? So like, I've been sitting here listening all this time, y'all. Let me tell you what I've been thinking.
Right.
Here's what I came up with.
Right, exactly. Yeah, that's right. That's right.
You know what I'm saying? Like, here's what I came up with.
That's real,
like, I heard your story, I heard her story, her story. Let me tell you what I think.
Yeah.
Based on what y'all said.
Yeah.
And then and I think, I think it's something that when we don't have, I think it's something that can help, that can cause us to lose a little bit of our humanity. We don't have that, like,
absolutely, man.
Like, wait a minute, let me get some feedback, and let me get some like real time feedback on how I'm perceiving this, or what I'm seeing, or what I'm commenting on, because I think it contributes to that that sort of dehumanizing, or not having the space to talk about something in a way that allows someone else sort of to be who they are, while you still are trying to wrestle with how you feel about it, or what you may perceive them to have done, or who that you perceive them to be. As a listener, do you have any favorite stories, favorite books, or nonfiction, fiction, or
man,
any you wanted to give a quick 5 or something? You know what I'm saying?
Shoot, bro. Yeah. Okay, so I would say this Maya Angelou book, Heart of a Woman. I'll give you my 5, like, sort of books that I just have moved me, right? That book, for sure. One of the first books I read was Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse, and that's a small book. It's have you read it? But that laid the foundation for me in a lot of ways of, like, the journey of life, and just walking it, and just experiencing some stuff, move on to some new stuff. You know what I mean? And, like, that's okay if you got to start over again. That's okay if you, but that adversity and those different experiences, I feel like can make you a good human being, and can help you connect to all different types of people, right? Because you put yourself in different types of communities and different types of situations, and it just allows you to really connect more broadly. So Siddhartha, obviously, the autobiography of Malcolm X still stands as, like, one of the most engaging and inspiring, heartbreaking books of all time when it comes to my list. I would also, I would also say, honestly, Barack Obama's Dreams of My Father was just really well written. It was a really well written book. the way he described his experiences, I was really moved by as a fellow biracial person, as someone who grew up in a place where there wasn't a lot of black people. So I related to that book a great deal. And then I would say, man, I would probably say, I can't remember the name of it right now. But it's a Harriet Tubman book. It's a book about Harriet Tubman. There's like 2 or 3 different, biographies, and I can't remember. It's by a sister. I can't remember her name, but that book too was just like, man, the courage, the commitment of that sister there, to overcome all the different challenges that she had, and to have the different phases, like the different phases of her life were crazy. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like
it's interesting. I've read a couple things about like everything like after the Civil War, and she was like trying to serve people, and like she was running the almost like I don't know if it was a care home's not the right term, but sort of like basically folks was in transition trying to figure out what they're going I'm probably far understating the gravity of it, but what the hell are you going to do with your life now that you're free from this violent bondage system? And I think the people that some of the folks that someone that she had in the house like stole from her, and like all kinds of like tribulations, but she was still trying to serve. You know what I mean?
Still
her people.
Serving. Yeah.
And like it was one of those things, we could go into the like, see, that's what's wrong with y'all. But
right.
See, no good. Like not even that, but it's just like how complicated it is though, like freedom is how complicated.
Yeah.
The one context of your life, it can be very clearly defined, right? And then once, emancipation happens, other stuff is sort of like, I still have this compulsion, right? And I still have this drive, and then other people obviously are taking your story and making it what they need to make it. Like I've read a couple parts of different biographies of her. I've not read any of them all the way through. I'm at to sit down and wrestle with that, because as a kid in America, like you black, and then Harriet Tubman, like,
right?
Everybody tell you, Harriet Tubman, she's freed slave,
right?
And you'd be like, yeah, but she was like a person, that had like lived a whole life, like it's not simple. You know what I mean? What her motivations were. I'm like, I think if I could add just a couple, for me. And I like to do all things like this, sort of like these is the ones that come to mind at the moment.
Right, exactly.
Not etched in stone.
No.
But, especially coming up, the Xenogenesis, it's 3 books, actually, by Octavia Butler, but I bought them. I read it the first time as a single volume, so that's the way I always think about it. But that's a book and a work of science fiction that challenged me and made me think about the world and about black women, and about my own sense of self and our society and a lot of other pieces in a much challenging way, as many of her works does, but that one specifically. The Community Itself, which is a small book by Naeem Akbar, is something I always about how you see yourself and self-development, and then something else that I'm actually working through right now is, I just finished, that I really enjoyed, was Michelle Obama's memoir, sort of about being First Lady, but sort of like becoming that person. And there was, I'm going to go back through, but there was a lot of different things in there around sort of the wrestling with your own direction, wrestling with the intentions of your folks, you know what I'm saying, and the circumstances of their decisions, you know what I mean, and then some of that stuff we even talked about earlier about like being with somebody and their sense of happiness and what you want, what they want, and how y'all can both be you and get what it was. I enjoyed hearing her tell her story. You know what I'm saying? And share that piece. I hope folks. I know a lot of people read it. It's obviously a bestseller and all that stuff, but I hope folks, had a similar. I would encourage somebody to check it out.
Yeah, yeah.
Cool.
I would also just add because I had to look at my damn Audible because I'm like I had to look at my books. I'm like, man, there's so many good ones, man. I would also add Just Mercy by Bryan Stevenson. That's a cold book right there. Cold book. Muhammad by Martin Ling, classic. Asada by Asada Shakur.
I actually just read that earlier this year.
Yeah, that's a cold book too. And what was the other one? Oh, I recently read Miles Davis' autobiography. Man, that one right there, cold. So it was so much better than I thought. It's not a book that I hear about. Like I really actually I didn't even know he had written an autobiography. And so, it's not like one of those ones that's called out as like, these are the ones, black autobiographies you got to read or whatever. It just isn't one. But someone who's passionate about music, and I'm really interested in the sort of the genealogy of music and how artists kind of, got their career started. And there's this like really cool sort of, tree, right? Family tree of like this artist, especially in jazz, like how you got put on and then this person, right? So like looking at like Miles Davis, who, started with why am I blanking on dude's name? Bird.
Charlie Parker.
Charlie Parker, thank you. Started with Charlie Parker, you know what I'm saying? And then Miles Davis and then John Coltrane. And one of my favorite musicians that's still alive today is Carlos Santana. And his music is really rooted in jazz. And Miles Davis and John Coltrane are like his sort of musical heroes. And Herbie Hancock, who came from working with Miles Davis. And so... learning Miles' story, it broke a lot of misconceptions in my mind about who he was as a person. And it also just spanned this huge time period of the different eras of jazz. And when jazz was nothing and underground to when it became sort of like the mainstream and the most popular form of music. And then it kind of went back underground, you know what I mean? Right. As like rock and roll and R&B kind of took off, and his role in all that. And I think I was just most inspired about his sort of, his unapologetic attitude in life. And in some ways that, probably hurt him more than helped him. But also he was very unapologetically black and always was that way, and came from a strong family, a family that was well-to-do in St. Louis, and he lived his life in a way where it's just like he was just enjoying his life and making his art. You know what I mean? And so that one was so dope. I love that book. So
right. Man. Well, unfortunately.
We got to wrap. I took up too much of your time.
No, this is good because that means we have so much more to come back together.
Right,
to talk about, man. But I'll get you out on this. Could you share? And this is one I didn't set you up for. So, is there, a piece of art, piece of creative work, something that you see differently now than maybe you saw it when you first experienced it? And you don't got to go into deep detail, but you can if you want to. That you just, in the moment, you're like, I thought this one way, but now I think about it, some way different. Is there something?
There's a film called Eve's Bayou. Samuel Jackson is a main character in it. That film. One of my, always enjoyed the film, always been a favorite of mine. Talking about, a different, my family's from Louisiana, originally, so I connect with it on that level a little bit, and was really, because there hasn't been many films centered on that experience in that location. But, referring to the earlier part of our conversation about violence against women, that's, I perceive some things in that film differently now and understand it as an adult, and also how memory serves us and things, people remember things differently, and it's there's a relativity in our own experiences and memories as well. And I think that film lightly, like, it covers that deeply, but you don't get it unless you get it. You know what I'm saying? So watching it now, I'm like, yo, this is crazy deep how they touch on this. But you got to get it to get it, I guess.
Indeed.
Beautiful film.
Well, Jordan, thank you for joining me, man.
Thanks for having me, man. I appreciate the opportunity to talk all this out and with great company and a great mind like yourself.
Oh man, well, thank you. And we will talk again.
Yes, I hope so, man. All right. It's a pleasure.
So this has been the Ask Your Oldhead podcast with Justice Rajee. Thank you for listening. Peace.